The Ruins of the Lost Realm is the first supplementary book for the One Ring 2nd edition, and it's split into 3 sections. The first of which presents, in a fair amount of detail, 7 key locations from the southern half of Eriador. These are different from landmark adventures as they are not made with specific stories in mind. Instead, they give a history of the area and some happenings that players might get involved in. Tharbad and Swanfleet are the most in-depth, and include a number of key Npcs. The second section of this book, A Gathering Storm, gives the lore masters an overview of some larger scale events that are happening around this time, such as what the Black Númenóreans or the Dunlending Raiders are up to, but also a new possible patron, Saruman. The final section of the book has 12 landmark adventures that can be dropped into a campaign. These range anywhere from 3 to 8 pages, and some include a focus on combat like Mount Graham, while others just present a notable location that players can visit, such as the Queen's Hall in Lone-lands or Weathertop. I really like that there's a mix here and that it isn't all based around combat encounters. The book also has a little appendix that has some alternative rules for councils and skill endeavors, borrowing items of superior worth and the Eye of Mordor, but not really much to talk about there. So, is this book a must-have for the One Ring? No, I wouldn't quite say it is, but that doesn't mean there isn't some really good stuff in here. My favorite supplement book for D&D is The Storm King's Thunder. What I really like about it is that even if you ignore the storyline in it, it's just a terrifically massive sandbox to play around in. There are probably close to 200 locations with tons of NPCs and side quests that are great for DMs to pull from. Ruins of the Lost Realm feels a little bit like that, just not as comprehensive. You've got a few detailed locations that could work well as safe havens if players put in the work to develop relationships there, and then the 12 landmark adventures that can be dropped in where you need them. My absolute favorite section of this book was the second one, A Gathering Storm. Having the machinations of the Black Númenóreans and the Dunlendings as this backdrop to your campaign I think would work really well. In this section there are some really good NPCs too. Some favorites being Eater of Ghosts, Zoriel, and Usapthon. It's also fun that Saruman is included here as a possible patron, although I think it would be really hard to use him in-game without players constantly trying to catch him turning to the dark side. As far as the landmark adventures go, it was a bit hit or miss for me how interested I was in them, but I think for the most part they seem pretty good. It is really hard to judge stories set in Middle-earth that aren't written by Tolkien, and I can appreciate how hard it is to try and write them. If you make an adventure that's too close to something from the books, it could seem like just copying, and then what's the point? However, if you make up too much, it can feel too far away from the source material, and that's not what people want. As well, there's going to be different aspects of Tolkien's writing that appeals to different people, and they'll want that represented in these adventures. That's a hard target to hit. I think it's important to remember that the absolute best adventures will always be ones that are tailored to the backstories of the players. So if you are a lore master running the One Ring, whether you are trying out adventures from this book or the ones that I have made or whatever, take some time to change around locations, NPCs, or plot elements to connect them to your players. Even if an adventure is super well written and seems to have incredible elements, if it isn't connected to your players, it might fall a bit flat. Anyways, back to Ruins of the Lost Realm. There are a few adventures here that really didn't get the Tolkien feel that I want, but there are some that I'm excited to try, like the Tree of Sorrow, the Shrouded Islets, and the Old Dwarf Mines. These last two have some great monsters, one being some fish creature that hunts players while in the fog-covered waters of Lake Evendim, and the other being like a great bear that really brought to mind the bear from Alex Garland's film Annihilation. There are some great opportunities for terrifying encounters, and if you haven't seen my video on fear in RPGs, consider checking that out. Something else that is great about this book, and what almost makes me say that it is a must-have, is the Adversaries. There are a whole bunch of them in here, including specific NPCs, nameless things, giant spiders, Númenórean soldiers, and more. The art in this book is really good as well. I had mentioned in my review of the core rules that I wasn't a fan of most of the pencil art. However, I think the pencil work in Ruins of the Lost Realm is pretty much all good. There's more detail and personality in them that I really like. Just look at these otters and tell me you don't want to find out more about what's going on here. I didn't find many of the maps to be very interesting. A lot of them feel too simple to be of much use, but they work well enough to give you a basic idea of the area's layout. Again, the artwork isn't what's important in an RPG, but it is nice to have great looking images in these books. One thing that surprised me was the deep cuts that are sprinkled throughout the book. There are a few references to the seas being Bent, Ringil, and Thorongil, without any explanation. It's not so much that if you don't know what those are you'll be lost, but enough to make me feel like this is a book written for people who are into the deep lore. The elements of this book that I was most disappointed with was the size. It's quite small, coming in at half the size of the core rules. I kind of wish they'd held off on releasing this and combined it with their upcoming Tales from the Lone-lands. The One Ring is a pretty expensive set of books, especially if you have to pay for long-distance shipping. However, one of the great things about Free League stuff is that you also get a PDF version, which is something I wish more companies would do. So, did Ruins of the Lost Realm get me excited for Tales from the Lone-lands? Not particularly. It was a good book overall, but possibly not worth the substantial price tag. I certainly won't be pre-ordering the next book, but I may get the PDF instead of a hard copy, unless there's something really terrific in it. I don't think there's much chance of this happening, but I would be interested to see what the One Ring could do if they made a full campaign book with one long plot. Finally, to sum up, in my opinion, the Ruins of the Lost Realm is not a must-have addition to the One Ring. However, there is a lot of great stuff in there, so if you are really loving the base game, this is worth checking out. If you have read the book already, let me know what you think below. That's all for now. I will mention that I have done a bit of a remake on all the downloads I've made for the game, which includes some extra blank sheets, fixed some spelling mistakes, and issues with my 2 landmark adventures, and reworked the Astari as a playable heroic culture, using a lot of the suggestions from commenters. Everything's got a new art style as well. There'll be a download link in the description. Anyways, thanks for watching.